You know, I've been using computers for decades now, and somehow I've ended up with 3 different operating systems running in my house. macOS runs on my daily driver, Windows runs on my gaming machine, and Linux runs on, well, basically everything else. So, how did that happen? What the heck is Linux? Welcome to Foxy's Lab. I'm Foxy, and in this series I explain complex smart home, IoT and home lab concepts in a way that makes sense. In this episode we're talking about Linux, the free open source operating system that powers everything from your Android phone to the world's most powerful supercomputers, and probably half the devices in your house that you didn't even know were computers. So, go grab a coffee, I'll get one too, and then we'll get into it. Linux is an operating system. It's the fundamental software that sits between your hardware and all of the applications you actually want to run. Okay, it's not an operating system really, but more on that later. Think of it like the foundations of a house. You don't really notice it when it's working properly, but without it, nothing else can function. Unlike Windows or macOS, Linux is free and open source, which means anyone can see how it works, modify it, or even build their own version. It's kind of like if someone gave you the recipe for Coca-Cola and said, go ahead, make your own version, change it however you like, and you don't owe us a penny. That's led to a massive ecosystem of different flavors called distributions or distros, each with their own personality. Some are designed for servers, some for desktops, some for tiny embedded devices, and some for people who just really like fiddling with config files until 3 o'clock in the morning. One of the most remarkable things about Linux is its versatility. It runs on a staggering amount of hardware. Your Android phone, that's running the Linux kernel. Your smart TV, probably Linux. Your router, very likely Linux. The International Space Station, yep, Linux. Those self-checkout machines at the supermarket, your car's infotainment system, and even some refrigerators. Linux, and you guessed it, Linux. It scales from devices
smaller than your thumb
to supercomputers the size of warehouses. This adaptability is one of the reasons it's become so dominant. Developers can use the same tools and the same core technologies from everything from a Raspberry Pi to a massive server farm. Here's a quick history. Back in 1991, a Finnish computer science student called Linus Torvalds was frustrated with the limitations of the operating systems available to him at the time. So, as you do when you're a 21-year-old genius with too much time on your hands, he decided to write his own operating system kernel. That's the core bit that talks to the hardware. He posted about it on Usenet, which was kind of the Reddit of its day, but for people who wore socks with sandals. And he said something along the lines of, hey, I'm working on a free operating system. It's just a hobby, it won't be anything big or professional. Spoiler alert, it became very big and very professional. Well, mostly. The open source community rallied around it, contributing code, fixing bugs and building tools. By the mid-90s, Linux had become a legitimate alternative to commercial operating systems, and today it runs on over 95% of the world's top supercomputers, most web servers and billions of devices worldwide. Oh, and Linus still maintains the kernel to this very day, and he's still very active in the community. He is a legitimate digital hero. Okay, let's dive into the terminology. Prepare yourselves, Linux loves its terminology, so this is another big bugger. Coffee time. The kernel is the heart of Linux. This is the bit that Linus actually wrote. It handles all the low-level stuff, like talking to your CPU, managing memory, and making sure your hard drives play nice with each other. Now, here's where it gets a bit nerdy, but I promise you this is worth knowing. When people say Linux, they're technically only talking about the kernel.
The kernel!
The actual operating system most people use is called GNU Linux, which is the Linux kernel combined with a whole bunch of other tools and utilities from the GNU project. But let's be honest, most people just say Linux because it's shorter and everyone knows what you mean. However, I include this little tidbit here as there are some Linux purists who will definitely call you out for not saying GNU Linux. Trust me, I've worked with quite a few of those people over the years. For the purposes of this video, and for most casual conversation, when I say Linux, I'm talking about the whole package, kernel plus all of the tools and the applications that make it actually usable. A distribution, or distro for short, is a complete operating system built around the Linux kernel. Think of it like this. The kernel is the engine, but the distro is the entire car, complete with seats, steering wheels, sound systems, and those little air fresheners that smell like disappointment. Different distros have different philosophies and use cases. Some are beginner friendly, some are built for servers, and some are built for people who enjoy pain. There are literally hundreds of distros out there, and I'll break some of the more popular ones down in just a bit, so stick around for that. The terminal, also referred to as the command line or the shell, is where you type commands instead of clicking buttons. I know, it looks a bit intimidating, especially if you grew up with graphical interfaces, but honestly, once you get the hang of it, it's incredibly powerful. You can do with one line of text what might take 20 clicks in a GUI, if you could even do it at all. Plus, you get to feel like a hacker in a 90s movie, so there's that. Under the hood, the terminal runs something called the shell. The most popular one is Bash, but other popular ones include Fish and my personal favourite, Zush. A shell is basically the interpreter that understands and runs your commands. Choosing your shell is a pretty personal choice. It's effectively deciding your preferred dialect to speak to the computer with. A package manager is how you install software on Linux. Instead of downloading application files from a random website and hoping it's not full of malware, you use a package manager to install software from a trusted software source known as a repository. On Ubuntu and Debian, that's apt. On Fedora and Red Hat, it's dnf. On Arch, it's Pacman. Yeah, really. Most developers are nerds, and we nerds love our references to pop culture. You can think of a package manager as an app store, as that's basically what it is. It's an app store for power users. Root is the super user account, the one with unlimited power to do absolutely anything on the system. But with great power comes great responsibility, and also the ability to accidentally delete your entire operating system with one single mistyped command. That's why you would generally use sudo instead, which lets you run individual commands with root privileges. It is in effect you confirming that you know what you're doing and willing to take responsibility for any screw-ups that occur because you lied about knowing what you were doing. Sudo stands for super user do, but I just like to think of it as me saying, just bloody do it, will you, to my computer. Just a quick note here, as I don't want to be the cause of any confusion. Root also refers to the root directory of the file system, written as just /. This is where everything in Linux starts, so when you hear root, it could mean the all-powerful user account or just the top of the directory tree. Context usually makes it obvious as to which one they're talking about. The GUI, or graphical user interface, often called the GUI, is the pretty bit with Windows icons and menus. Linux doesn't just have one GUI. You can choose from dozens of desktop environments like GNOME, KDE, XFCE or Cinnamon, each with their own look and feel. Or you can skip the GUI entirely and just use the terminal, which is common on servers where you don't need the overhead of running a graphical interface. I won't go into the different GUI options as we're keeping things pretty high level here, but I'll touch on them a little bit later on in the distros section. Again, I'll pop a link in the description to point you to a place where you can learn more about them if you so desire. Open source means the code is publicly available for anyone to inspect, modify and distribute. This is fundamental to Linux's philosophy. It means if you don't like how something works, you can change it. It also means thousands of developers can contribute improvements and catch security issues. It's the exact opposite of proprietary software, where the code is locked away and you just have to trust that the company knows what they're doing, which they often don't, if they even care. In this era of subscription software and encrapification, open source is something of a light shining in the dark. If you can find an open source version of a bit of software that you use, you may find you have a more pleasant experience. Right. Let's talk about some of the most popular Linux distros and what makes each one special. Ubuntu is probably the most well known. It's designed to be user-friendly and just work out of the box. This makes it brilliant for beginners. It ships with GNOME as its desktop environment, which is clean, modern and fairly intuitive if you're coming from Windows or macOS. It's what I use for most of my development VMs, and the server version of Ubuntu is my server operating system of choice when I'm not using Unraid. Ubuntu itself comes in multiple sub-distros, which are actually usually called flavors, like Kubuntu for example, which is basically the same as Ubuntu, but uses KDE as the GUI instead of GNOME. Debian is Ubuntu's mummy.
Are you my mummy?
She's rock solid, incredibly stable, and takes a more conservative approach to updates. Debian also uses GNOME by default, though the installer gives you options to choose from several other desktop environments if you prefer. If Ubuntu is your non-stick frying pan, easy to use, works great for most things and doesn't need much fuss, then Debian is your nan's cast iron skillet. It's heavy, takes a bit more care to maintain, but it'll outlast everything else in the kitchen and will still be able to cook a perfect meal when all of us are long dead. Arch is for the tinkerers and perfectionists. You literally build it from the ground up, choosing exactly what you want, and that includes your desktop environment. Arch doesn't ship with a GUI at all. You pick one and install it yourself, which is kind of the whole point. It's got a reputation for being difficult, but Arch users will tell you that's exactly why they love it. They like having complete control over every aspect of their system. There's even a meme about Arch users constantly telling everybody that I use Arch, by the way. I mention this because if I get any comments on this video, it's probably going to be either somebody telling me that they use Arch or telling me that something else I said is wrong. It's basically 50-50 at this point.
Wrong.
Fedora is the distro sponsored by Red Hat, which we'll talk about in a sec. And it tends to be on the cutting edge of new features. It also ships with GNOME and often showcases the latest version with all the newest features before the other distros adopt them. You'd choose Fedora if you wanted something stable enough for daily use, but you also like being the first to try new tech. It's basically Red Hat's testing ground for features that eventually make their way into RHEL, which means you get to play with tomorrow's enterprise tools today. Just don't expect the same level of conservative stability as Debian. Fedora is more, let's see what happens, than if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Sticking with the head covering theme, there's also Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or RHEL to its friends, which is the commercial enterprise grade version that big companies pay actual money for because they want support contracts and someone to yell at if things go wrong. It uses GNOME as well, although honestly it's most commonly deployed as a server without any GUI at all. There are literally hundreds of other distros out there, some serious, some bizarre, and some that exist purely because someone thought, what if Linux but Justin Bieber flavoured? In my setup, Linux is absolutely everywhere. I generally run Ubuntu on my virtual machines for development work. It's stable, well documented, and plays nicely with pretty much anything I throw at it. My homelab runs on Unraid and Proxmox, both of which are Linux based. Unraid is my main storage and Docker host, while Proxmox handles my virtual machines, which usually run Ubuntu. Neither of them feel like traditional Linux because they've got fantastic web interfaces, but under the hood, it's all Linux doing the heavy lifting. Honestly, Linux is perfect for servers and behind the scenes work. It's rock solid, efficient, and doesn't need rebooting after every little update. Now, here's where I'm going to get real with you for a moment. I really want to use Linux as my daily driver on my main machine. I've tried multiple times over the years, and each time I do get a bit further before hitting a wall, but the issue isn't Linux itself. The issue is that support for some of the more professional software I use just isn't quite there yet. Things like Adobe Creative Suite, some features in DaVinci Resolve, which is where I edit my videos, and some of the more niche applications I need either don't run on Linux at all or require jumping through hoops with compatibility layers that don't always work perfectly. But, and this is important, it's getting closer. The gap is narrowing every year, and tools like Proton have made gaming on Linux genuinely viable, which was unthinkable just a few years ago. More and more professional software is either getting Linux native versions or working beautifully through Wine and similar tools. I reckon within the next few years, I will finally be able to make the switch properly. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to the day where I too can say, I use Arch by the way. If you're enjoying this video so far, give me a like and hit subscribe. Are you a Linux user? What distro do you run? Drop a comment and let me know. Bonus points if it's something wonderfully obscure. We've got a Discord server now too. It's still a bit quiet, but that just means you're pretty much guaranteed to have a conversation with me, so if that tickles your fancy, there's a link in the description. So Linux is free, powerful, and infinitely customizable. But before you all yell, what are we waiting for? Let's go! And go and format your laptop, hold your horses. Remember, Linux distros are a fancy wrapper around a kernel, which means they're all just pretty nuts. So, I'm afraid that it's time to drag you, kicking and screaming, into the gotchas. Hardware compatibility can be a nightmare. Most hardware works out of the box these days, but you'll probably still encounter something that just refuses to play nicely. Printers are notorious for this, as are some Wi-Fi cards and certain graphics cards. I bought a used laptop a few months ago specifically to put Linux on, and I cannot for the life of me figure out how to get the Wi-Fi drivers working on it. This isn't true of all hardware, but you should learn from my mistake and do a quick Google of the hardware you plan to use with Linux to see if there are any gotchas that will trip you up. NVIDIA drivers in particular have a complicated relationship with Linux. They work, but getting them set up can involve some swearing and probably a few cups of coffee, or maybe something even stronger. The command line is mostly unavoidable. Look, most modern Linux distros have made huge strides in making everything graphical and user-friendly, but at some point, usually when you're troubleshooting something, you're going to need to open a terminal and type some commands. The good news is, it's not as scary as it looks. The bad news is, if you copy and paste commands from the internet without really understanding what they do, you might accidentally do something very, very stupid, like that infamous command that deletes your entire system. Don't do that. If you use AI to help you, then I'd be extra careful. Remember that LLMs can hallucinate, and just because they say that a command is safe to run doesn't necessarily mean that it is. Use them to assist and learn by all means, but do not give one control over your system unless you are knowledgeable enough to understand when it's leading you up the garden path. Software ability can be hit or miss. Like I said earlier, loads of open source software runs on Linux. In fact, some of the best development tools are Linux native. But if you need specific commercial software like Adobe Creative Suite, Microsoft Office, or whatever the hell they're calling it these days, or certain professional audio and video tools, you may find yourself disappointed. Yes, there are alternatives. Yes, there are compatibility layers, but they're not always perfect substitutes, especially if you're collaborating with others or trying to work to professional standards. The good news on that front is if you don't need any software like that, say for example you're mostly working in a browser, you could probably switch over to Linux today and be 100% fine. I envy you. Distro hopping can be a real addiction. Once you realise there are hundreds of distros out there, you'll probably be tempted to try them all. Ooh, maybe this one will be perfect for me, I hear you say. Trouble is, none of them are perfect, and switching distros isn't a quick job. Pick one that works for your needs. Learn it properly and resist the urge to start fresh every few weeks. All distros are pretty customizable. You can change the GUI and swap parts out as you see fit, but I'd just stick with the out-of-the-box experience for a while until you get used to it, especially if it's your main machine. I mean, unless you enjoy that sort of thing. No judgment, I have an Arch VM set up to do exactly that. Which I've never touched even once, but honestly I'll get to it one day though, I swear.
Sure you will.
Documentation quality varies wildly. The Arch wiki is legendary for being comprehensive and well written, even if you're not using Arch. Ubuntu's documentation is also generally excellent, but some of the smaller distros or niche software packages have documentation that's, let's say, minimalist. And by that I mean, good luck figuring that one out. If you're coming from Windows, you may need to adjust to a different way of managing drives and directories. One thing that could trip new people up is that Linux organises drives differently. There's no C drive or any other alphabetised drive for that matter. Everything lives in one big directory tree, starting at the root folder, which is represented with a /. Extra drives and USB sticks get mounted into that tree instead of getting their own letters. On top of that, Linux is much stricter about file permissions, which is great for security, but it does mean you will occasionally be told permission denied and have to figure out whether it's you, the file, or the command that is the problem. If you're using the GUI, it does often make file management a lot simpler, but it's still an adjustment. However, if you're using the command line, it's worth learning how to navigate the directory tree before you dive into anything, otherwise you'll get lost almost instantly. That's far too deep a topic for this video, but there are a ton of great sources out there that will definitely help you. Stick around till the end of the video and I'll point you to a few of the good ones. Rule 1. Start with a beginner-friendly distro. If you're new to Linux, don't jump straight into Arch or Gentoo just because someone on Reddit said it will teach you properly. I mean, it will, but you'll also grow a neck beard and start saying actually a lot, and nobody wants that. Plus, it's very, very stressful. Start with something like Ubuntu, Linux Mint, or Pop! OS. Get comfortable with how Linux works, then decide if you want to go deeper. For most users, the out-of-the-box experience of most modern distros is all they'll ever need. There's absolutely no point in making life harder than it has to be. You can always move to Arch later if you feel like getting your geek on. Rule 2, back up before you experiment. Linux gives you the power to break things spectacularly, so before you start messing with system files or trying commands you found on Stack Overflow, make sure you've got backups. This goes double if it's your main machine. You don't want to miss an important meeting because you were busy trying to restore your display drivers. Or if you do want to miss that meeting, I'm sure you can come up with a better excuse than that.
I was dead at the time.
Rule 3, read the error messages. I know they look intimidating, but Linux error messages are usually quite informative if you actually read them. 9 times out of 10, the error message will tell you exactly what went wrong and even give you hints at how to fix it. For the 10th message, stick it into Google or your favourite AI. There's a very high likelihood that many people have had that exact issue before and have documented it somewhere. Rule 4, keep your system updated. Run your updates regularly. Updates aren't just new features, they're security patches and bug fixes. A well-maintained Linux system is incredibly stable, but that does mean you actually have to maintain it. Rule 5, use the package manager. Resist the urge to download random installers from websites. Use your distro's package manager whenever possible. It handles dependencies, keeps things organised and makes updates painless. Only go outside the package manager when you absolutely have to, and make sure that you trust the source that you're getting the files from. Rule 6, be careful about using sudo. Just because you can run something with root privileges, it doesn't mean you should. Respect the power of the sudo command. Double check commands before you run them, especially if they involve deleting things or modifying system files. Remember, sudo rmrf/ is not a joke, it's a cautionary tale. Granted, there are a lot of modern distros these days that actually defend against that command. I would recommend that you don't test it out to see if yours is one of them.
Can I borrow your computer?
In the software development world, we have a rule called the principle of least privilege, which basically means that you don't give software access to something unless it needs it. That principle applies here too. Sudo is a superpower. Don't use it unless you have to. If you're just starting out with Linux, there are a ton of YouTube tutorials and channels that can help you out. Learn Linux TV is a pretty good one, as is the Linux Experiment. The Arch Wiki is also an incredible resource. Even if you're not using Arch, it's one of the best documented sources of Linux knowledge on the internet. Links are in the description. So that's Linux, the free open source operating system that's been powering the internet, your phone, and countless smart gadgets for the past 3 decades. It's powerful, flexible, and once you get over the initial learning curve, it's genuinely brilliant. Whether you're running servers, building a home lab, or just want an alternative to Windows and macOS, Linux has got you covered. What the Heck is an ongoing series where I explain the ins and outs of tech. I try to post a new video weekly, usually on Monday, so if you want to be notified when the next episode drops, hit the bell and YouTube will make sure you're kept in the loop. So next time Beyonce asks, you'll know that whilst girls may be the ones calling the shots, it's Linux all the way down. Ta-ra.